All right. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us, either live here at 3014 or via Zoom. We've got the board up here, so we'll be looking up at the board a lot to see who is talking. Since it is a joint meeting between the Board of Supervisors and Knoxville City Council, we've got to go through our formal process to call to order. I'll start off, and then I'll turn it over to Mayor Hatch for Knoxville. So I would, Jake, entertain a motion to call this meeting to order. A roll call for the Board of Supervisors.
Keisha Joner.
Here.
Mark Ramey.
Here.
Steve McCombs.
Here. Then Jake, an approval of our agenda, which will be a progress update on the VA property. Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion we approve this evening's agenda.
Second.
Jake?
McCombs.
Aye.
Ramey.
Aye.
Joner.
Aye.
Very good. I'll turn it over to Mayor Hatch for Knoxville.
Thanks, Chairman Ramey. Thank you guys for agreeing to meet with us. We will call our council meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Sir. Here. Gata.
Here.
Morse.
Here.
Plum.
Here.
DeYoung. Here.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Mark, if you want to give a brief presentation, and then we can go through the updates that we had discussed.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Again, thanks for joining us. We wanted to set aside some time to get a progress update to everybody, both here at the Board of Supervisors and for the Knoxville City Council. Things that have gone on with the VA project to date. Once we get through the different discussion items, so we'll have an update on our archaeology, the RFP process that we had to do as part of our agreement with SHPO and GSA to acquire the property. And then we'll have an update from our new partners at Confluence who are working on the master plan for the VA property. We'll then talk about potentially next meetings, frequency, are they necessary, things of that nature, and then we'll adjourn. I thought it would be beneficial for us to get together, though, to have a discussion jointly on a periodic basis, just so we can have visibility as elected officials. It has been the view of the Board of Supervisors that even though Marion County technically owns the property, we are looking for Knoxville to provide guidance, input, and suggestions as we go forward, because this is an integral part of Knoxville. The reason the board got involved in the first place was to provide that level of support from a balance sheet perspective to acquire the property, but have Knoxville eventually be the owner and controller of that property someplace down in the future. So I think it's very critical that we jointly meet, talk, go through issues if there are any, but at a minimum, keep everybody updated on the progress of the things that we have to do to begin to prepare the property for construction of whatever it is we construct. I think workforce housing is still front of mind. We just approved a project today in Pella, the Prairie Ridge development. We approved the development agreement, which will include financing for that project, again, centrally focused on workforce housing. So anyway, with that, I'd like to just have a series of some progress updates. I'll say this to the board here, Steve and Keisha. I'll say it to you, Knoxville City Council members. If you have a question during any of this, I don't know if you have buzzers, if your things light up like on the old Hollywood squares. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but we'll do our best. So shout out and say, hey, I have a question, and we'll stop the proceedings there. You'll, Brian, do a wave, however it works, and then we can try our best to answer those. I have in the room with me here Chris Nestaby, our facilities director. Chris has been the project manager for this project. working closely with Confluence and our other providers, putting fence around the VA, providing a level of security to the property, et cetera. So we'll have the right folks in the room. I'd like to start off with Brian giving an update on archaeology. Aaron can talk about the RFP process. I'll talk a little bit about Confluence, but I'm going to turn that over to Chris and Matt, who is on the phone as well, to do that. Are there any questions before we get started? All right, seeing none. Again, shout out if you have one. Brian, maybe you can start off talking a little bit about our archaeological section of this, of what we have to do out at the property.
Sure. So if everyone recalls, this is one of the boxes that we had to check when we made an agreement with GSA and SHPO, the archaeological study. We did reach out to the University of Iowa, the Office of State Archaeologists, and so they have agreed to come down and do the phase 1 archaeological study for us. It's been delayed with the current pandemic. They're now able to travel, so they're going to come down this month. And the deadline for them to finish that project is actually July 17th. So we should hear something back shortly after that. Hopefully we can check that box and be done. At this point, it's a phase 1 study. They'll go out and dig a bunch of holes all around the campus in areas that we've noted as potential areas. And if they don't find anything real significant, they'll check off at that point. If they do find something, it could potentially turn into a phase 2 study, which would mean more holes. So we'll see what happens after July 17th, but that is moving forward. Hopefully we'll be done here in another month or so.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Brian regarding the archaeological study?
Brian, those sites that were determined by SHPO. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep. They were, and throughout the time there's been several studies done, and those were those potential areas of interest for them that they felt were there would be the most probable area for archaeological findings, artifacts, whatever it is, because of past houses that may have been there from early settlers, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for Brian on the archaeological piece? Dylan?
Just so that we've got this out there, what are we looking at in terms of cost, and is that sort of in line with where we expected it to be in some of our early conversations and estimations?
Great question. Brian, do you remember what the cost of this was going to be?
I am trying to pull it up right now, Mark. Give me 1 second, I've got it right here. I'm sorry. $12,773, which is about what we expected. When we first met with SHPO, they said they thought it would be around that 10 to 15 price range. So it's right where we thought we would land.
And that's just for the phase 1. If it needs to go any deeper, further than that, of course, there will be added costs, but the phase 1 is in that 10 to 15 that we had ballparked.
Correct.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
just for the phase 1, yeah.
Perfect.
Very good. Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions from anyone? So you will see them if you hear anybody asking questions. You will see them out there in the next few weeks digging several holes. They're small test holes. They won't be very big. That they're just going through their process, and there'll be hundreds of them that they dig.
Okay, very good. Brian, thank you for that update. I appreciate it. Aaron, perhaps an update on the RFP process for buildings 27 and 28. So, Aaron, I'll let you take that away.
Thank you, Chairman Ramey. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I don't know if you guys are experiencing lag, but I sure am, so I apologize if you can't understand me. But we do have the RFP completed. As you will recall, as part of the agreement, SHPO had to agree to that. They had 30 days to review that, and Glenn Lyons has completed it with SHPO's blessing.
Right.
That is now posted to the VA website, and the clock is set and started. The major milestones to be aware of would be in the middle of July, July 15th, we are opening it up for an open house for people who might potentially be interested in those buildings. And then the date for them to express interest will be August 14th at the close of business. That's a Friday afternoon. So they will have till 5 p.m. on August 14th to express any.
Okay.
We lost him.
interest.
Yeah, Aaron, we lost you, bud.
Okay, sorry. Can you guys hear me? Mine's lagging pretty bad. I apologize for that.
No, it's okay. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Did any of that come through?
Yeah, we got all the way up to the
August 14th.
close of
14th.
business on August 14th.
That's really it. That's the deadline for people to
Okay. Yeah, we're kind of losing you, Aaron.
express interest. So they'll have until that time.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. I'll kind of fill in a little bit there. If you remember the RFP process, again, that was part of, and that's in the legal documents that we signed with SHPO and GSA. We need to market these buildings. Glenn has done a great job, and Dylan, from a cost perspective, it's going to be roughly, he's $15,000 from a consulting standpoint. And we're going to fold all these costs into the total project. So they're going to eventually be all accounted for. I've asked Jake to set aside from different accounting codes on how we go about allocating those funds. From the RFP standpoint, we will review any applications. So if there are interested parties between Brian and Aaron and myself, we will take a look at those and see if any are viable. And then we'll go forward if there are viable ones that meet the total intent of what we want for that property. And if they don't, then we won't accept them, and we'll be working with SHPO on a consultation basis along those lines. So any questions on the RFP process? Or Brian, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, Mark, maybe just to clarify with everyone, when Aaron mentioned the open house, I just want to make sure people realize that will be for potential developers who are interested, just so we don't get, I don't want to get the impression that it's an open house for the public.
It's not for the public, yeah.
Will developers have the opportunity to tour the structures themselves, or is it sort of a sight unseen, or what does that process entail?
Yeah, if we have interested developers, Dylan, they'll get to tour those two buildings. That's what this is referring to.
Sure.
Again, we've got to go through, it can't just be anybody showing up and saying, hey,
Right.
I'm interested. So we've got some pretty, there are some stringent requirements for this, but they'll get to look at the property. You can't go upstairs in a couple of the buildings because you can't go up the stairs. So the open house is pretty limited because if you go up the stairs, you fall through the stairs. So,
Dylan, were you referring to the RFP, or were you referring to as city council members?
The RFP.
Okay.
The RFP.
yeah, good question.
Mark, if I could, I'm back and hopefully with a better internet connection here.
There you go.
And this may have been covered. I apologize. I dropped out and rejoined, and I seem to be going a little smoother now. But the open house will be for those who RSVP only. They would be directed to RSVP to Glenn Lyons. if we don't hear any response, there won't be any kind of open house. And as the mayor was mentioning, I'm glad he did it. This is not just for any person to come in off the street. You would need to RSVP and have some level of professionalism, and we would have to have some level of confidence that you would be somebody who could actually pull this project off before we would want to take you inside buildings. They're really not safe and not in good condition for people to just be in to sightsee.
Does our obligation in any way end if there are no RSVPs, if there's no early interest, or do we have to run through? I mean, we've got that 60-day period, so August 14th then would be our end date on all of this. Is that right?
That's correct, Councilmember Morris. That people would have till 5 p.m. on August the 14th to have any kind of a response. So I think the open house would be a good indicator if we don't have a response, but I don't think we can officially close the door.
That's correct. Very good.
So can the development of this, is that wide open to developer proposals of how one of those buildings would be utilized?
Brian, Aaron, you want to take that, or I can take it?
Well, I can go first here, Mark, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So it would be a process. Again, so the first thing they would have to do is express their intent, and that would start us down a path. That has to occur within the 60 days prior to the August 14th deadline. At that point, we would have an opportunity to meet with whatever developer would potentially be interested. And the phrase that's coming to mind is sort of kick the tires. They would be able to do a little more due diligence with those two buildings, or one if they were interested in the one. And on the flip side of that, we would be able to vet them better as a developer. It is not our expectation that, just Joe Schmo handyman who can swing a hammer will be able to come in and have one of these buildings. I think that's true to form with SHPO as well. In fact, they're going to be sending it to a group of folks who have worked with historic tax credits in the past and pulled off projects like this. Frankly, the opportunity cost will be pretty high for somebody to go after this who doesn't have that experience. And if it isn't somebody from a very short list of contractors who SHPO has worked with in the past, we are probably not going to have anyone express interest in it. Without leveraging those tax credits, there's just no way a project would ever pencil out. And that will tend the project towards residential development, just on the nature of those tax credits.
Aaron, this is Steve McCombs. Correct me if I'm wrong, but any developer even a credible developer, the buildings that the RFP is about, we currently cannot serve them any infrastructure. Is that correct?
That is correct. As they sit today, there would be significant investment to bring them utilities. So that is correct.
Okay, I thought so.
Aaron, one question. I know that the link that you sent to all of us had all of this information. It's about 20 pages, and it had very detailed information about who can apply, what developers, have the opportunity to submit RFPs. This all goes back with Glenn Lyons currently. Is that information on the VA development website as well?
Yes, that's exactly where we have it posted and where we will direct people to be able to see the actual RFP document you're describing. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Good questions. Anybody else? Any questions on the RFP? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Next, we want to give an update on the master planning process. As you know, we've entered into an agreement with Confluence. Very excited to have Matt and his team on board to develop a comprehensive master plan for the VA. So, John, I want to go back a little bit to your question, and maybe you weren't intending this, but if you weren't, I'm still going to answer it this way. And that is that even the RFP, we've got all kinds of structural infrastructure issues that we think are going to prevent people from or limit the number of applicants. With that being said, it is still not open to anybody because the final approval for any of this is between us and SHPO. So even if someone comes in with a really, their heart's desire is 27 and 28 and they want to build, I don't know, an amusement park, we can still say no to that because it does not fit with the intent of why we acquired the property in the first place. So if you weren't intending to ask that, kind of go in that direction, John, I wanted to make sure that I at least took it in that direction because from a Board of Supervisor perspective, we got into this for workforce housing and all the things attendant to that type of development. So something that is inconsistent with that, we are going to be very reluctant to want that in there. Yeah. Which then gets us to Matt and his team and Chris. They've come on board to do a master planning project for us to look at the VA, adjacent spaces around the VA, and provide us with a comprehensive view of how we would develop this property given the original intent of having workforce housing go into that space. So with that, Chris, I'm going to turn that over to you, and Matt, maybe if you want to give.
I just want to say that, to curtail on what Mark said, us as supervisors would be very lax in our duties to the taxpayers if we could not see a return on the investment that we're talking about putting in there.
Right. So
again, John, you know, I know he used the term amusement park. You know, basically to me, that's probably not much of a return on our investment over, you know, a 50, 100-year period.
Right. Very good. So Chris, maybe a little intro and talk to Matt, or why we've got Matt and what they're doing, and
sure.
Go from there.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so Chris Nestaby, Facilities Director for Marion County, also appointed project manager over the VA project. So just real high level, I don't want to take a ton of time up. Want to leave room for questions if you have any. Right now, currently, as you can tell, the fence is complete. The gates are locked. I know Mayor Hatch has a key. And if any of you folks ever need to get out there, you want to take a look at anything, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll make sure that happens. So a couple months back, we had some initial conversation when we took over the property about who the best fit would be to look at an overall master plan process. Checked around and one name came up multiple times. We actually talked with our design architect on our courthouse project, and he highly recommended Matt and his team, and we contacted them. Matt has been outstanding in every aspect. Him and his team have hit the ground running, and they're running pretty hard. So I want to leave more room for questions that I want banter on my end. If you have questions about the process, where we're at, I can tell you right now, the survey crew has been active on that property for the last 5 weeks, I believe. I know they're coming really close to the end point on that, and we're going to start seeing a lot of that survey data come into place. Matt and his team have been out on the property multiple times. They've also been in the community talking with folks. So I'm going to turn that over to Matt, let him explain where they are. I know he has some prior engagements this evening, so I don't want to keep him extremely long. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, all good. First off, hello, everybody. I look forward to the time when I can sit in a room and actually meet all of you in person, but we are where we are today, and we certainly have hit the ground running. I think it's a super fun project. I think hopefully Mark and Chris have seen the enthusiasm that I bring and then my team brings to this, but we also teamed with Garden Associates out of Oskaloosa. They're our survey crew for that. They're very valuable to this process. We need to understand what's all out there. But the other thing we've done, and this is just part of our process, is we want to hear everything first. Before we ever pick up a pencil, before we come up with any ideas that we've seen or things that we've done all over the Midwest, we want to make sure we understand Knoxville, and we want to understand all the different players involved. And I think Mark said it best earlier, you know, this site is about the VA property, but at the same time, it also influences everything around the VA property. So we've tried to make a collective list of stakeholders. And so we've spent the last probably 2 to 3 weeks trying to identify different folks. I think a few of you on this call we've probably met with. But the intention is to understand how this property can benefit Knoxville, how we can generate that tax base, how we can be attractive to developers, how we can work well with all the neighbors, all those things sort of in a big bundle. And obviously there's a number of players here. The racetracks across the tracks, we've got property owners to the north, we have the school district to the south. How do we weave this web all together and make it something that makes Knoxville what it is and can only make it better? And then at the same time, we have to weave this all by giving a nod to history. I think the archaeological study that you talked about, hopefully for your sake and lengthening out the process, they don't find anything. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we can't give a nod in some relationship of whether there's a memorial or whether we keep something or whether we reuse the brick or whatever the answer is. It's our intent here for really the first month or so to just get feedback from everybody and have a conversation and try to talk to those folks about what's important to them. If you've lived in Knoxville your whole life, what does the VA mean to you? How do we do those things, but also look towards the future? So we're really just doing our homework, getting all that information, compiling it, taking notes, and then we're going to compile all that with the data that we're going to get from Garden and Associates and their team that's been on the ground doing things for the past 5 weeks. I think that is about right, Chris. And then all those things kind of stir together, and then we sit down for a couple days and just have a brainstorming session of coming up with the right plan. And then you're really kind of beating it up too. This is a process. We're going to go back and forth about, what are the right things for the right locations and how do they fit together. And the other thing is, as we meet with these folks, we're asking them to be ambassadors for the process and for your project. So making sure that we hear them. And the other thing, just quite honestly, is we're never going to make everybody happy, but we're also going to make sure we reach out to those folks. And we want to hear them and understand their needs. And then when I go back to them and show them the final plan, I want to be able to explain to them, here's the reason we didn't do what you asked us to do. I think that gets us a lot of goodwill in the community, and it also allows us to build a relationship with these folks where they have a trustworthiness with us. And I think the other thing I can start out with is we've done these, we do developments around the country, really around the Midwest. We have 8 offices around the Midwest, from Fargo, North Dakota, to Chicago, down to Kansas City, and everything kind of in between. And my team and I have traveled and do projects kind of like this, so we certainly know what happens elsewhere, but we want to make sure that this project is Knoxville when it's done. So that's a really high level, big picture kind of where we're at. Process is going to take 4 months-ish, I think was where we kind of ended up, but we also didn't want to hurry it. With the kind of strange relationship we're in with COVID and we're all talking via computer at this point, we want to make sure there's some public input and some things like that. So it may drag on a little bit more than that, but we're certainly going to be here to apply what we can and get things done as quick as possible.
Excellent.
Chris, I'll turn it back to you unless people have questions. I'm certainly happy to answer them.
No, great. Matt, thank you. This is Mark. I'll just, one thing I want to, again, emphasize is that what we've asked, really tasked Confluence with, is not just to look at the building footprint, but to look beyond the building footprint. Because the buildings itself and what we do in developing that space will have a ripple effect throughout that entire area. So we're asking them to take a holistic view. We're asking them to look at the property where no buildings exist, because there are several spots to the VA that we don't have buildings, and what's the potential for those spaces as well. And I think with that we can come up with a long-term plan for that area that people who sit in these chairs after us will be able to execute on, depending on how far we all get with this project, because this won't get done in a year. This is a longer duration than that. So that's one of the reasons we're excited to have Confluence and Matt's team on board, and really looking forward to this process. Yeah.
And I don't have anything else unless anybody has any detailed questions about the VA, where we're sitting at, questions, concerns. I'm open for anything.
Anybody, any questions?
Has anybody on the city council heard any negative comments about fencing that property off?
I'll say, that there is conversation about that being fenced off, but most people seem to understand it's a liability issue. But certainly there's community discussions about, how the fence looks and why it's closed. but there hasn't been any major pushback on that, I don't think.
I would hope everybody would understand why, the reasoning behind it.
And I've just simply explained it's a liability concern, and there's going to be people in there working, and it's just time to move into that next phase. Can I ask about this next phase and how Confluence is different than Glen Lyons? Is this just going to be more of a master plan, and Lyons was just a high-level idea?
Yeah. Well,
We lost them.
Somebody started a new meeting with this account.
all right, did you pay your bill on your Zoom
Reconvene.
connection, guys? I can't remember where we left off.
Bounce.
It's cost savings, Mark, cost savings.
Sorry, I just had to get the hamster going on the hamster wheel. It's connected to a generator, you know?
I was going to say, it's a new way to adjourn a meeting. Just go, time's up, you're done. All right, very
I
good.
think everyone is back, except for I think we don't have anyone from Confluence at this point.
Yeah, we excused them,
Okay.
so they had some other engagements to get to. So any questions on process? Where did we leave off? So any questions on that?
I think I was just asking what the difference is between the Confluence, and is that an in-depth master plan versus the Lions plan that we had started on.
Yeah, the Confluence piece is an in-depth master plan, and Glenn is just working on 27 and 28. So he's just acting as our consultant, mostly because of his expertise in dealing with state historic preservation. So he knows that world. He can get this stuff done, get the documents done, working with contractors in that respect. So it's a narrow focus.
And Megan, to be clear, like when you asked about Glenn's original concept plan, that was the idea kind of from the beginning when we first met with Glenn, was just to get a very high level overview of what the area could look like. Nothing in depth. And then once we were able to secure the property, we could decide how much more information and how much more detail we wanted to go into.
So yeah, I think that was my question, was the difference between a Confluence and the Glen Lyons proposal. And then is the county covering the fees for Confluence? Is that split between the city and the county, or is the county planning to cover that?
We're folding all that into our cost. So.
If none of you have had the opportunity to look up Confluence, I strongly suggest you do. They have a vast, they're very impressive.
Yeah. So I'm not even thinking of the Glen Lyons plan, whatever he did. This is starting from really a clean slate from that perspective. And really like these guys. I think they're going to do a good job for us.
Yeah, and I just talked to Matt via text. He had to get going. He did offer, if any of you on the city council at any time would like to sit down and have a little more in-depth conversation with him, he was completely open to that. If you want to forward that request on, I will make sure it gets passed through and we can set something up. He was more than happy to come back down to Knoxville or via Zoom just to answer any questions. And I'm sure, going forward, we're going to have many more meetings as this master plan even starts to unfold.
Right.
So
I'd love to see him at a city council meeting, or even a work session, just to put some feelers out there for the rest of the council.
I'll pass that on for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have a few, he should be. They're on the list, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all of you folks are on the list.
Yeah, you're all on the list.
So he will be reaching out to all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. We should all be getting contacted by them because they want to reach out to each council member to have that conversation with you guys.
Good.
Council, does anybody have any other questions or comments? about anything related to the VA campus?
I think it is important that we do have these meetings. It's nice to kind of be kept in the loop, especially when we've got citizens asking, you know, what do you know about the VA? What's going on? It's nice to be able to give them some progress notes versus not being able to say anything.
Yeah. Well, John, that kind of gets to the next item is, because I think that's important too, and that's one of the reasons I asked, you know, to have this session. What would be your desired frequency of these meetings? Because I think going from here on out, we probably need to have a regular schedule and special meetings if the situation warrants. And we can sure cancel if there's nothing to talk about because everybody's got a lot of things going on in their lives. But I think we should at least talk about meeting frequency. John, do you have anything in mind?
I guess I would, you know, I don't know if we're at a point where things are moving fast enough to do a meeting every month, or, you know, there's long timelines right now on some of the things that are going to happen. Is every 2 months, is that enough? And then we simply adjust it, you know, as needed for what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I had thought about a 30-day window that we could certainly say, you know what, it's going to be longer than that, so let's carry it out. But at least on a monthly basis, it keeps things relatively fresh.
Yeah, I like the monthly also, just because we know that the July 15th open house could possibly, so we have one near that, and kind of know if we have any interest.
Steve?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Monthly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it warrants it down the road that we have to increase, then we can do it then.
Yep. How does monthly sound,
Now,
guys?
Council, everyone okay with monthly?
That feels right.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right, John. I think it's imperative that everybody be on the same page so you can answer those questions to the best of our ability anyway.
All right, good. Well,
Can I ask one other question? I saw on your Board of County Supervisor agenda that you had a discussion about grounds for the Marion County Fair Board.
Yep.
Is that VA grounds?
No.
No.
No, those are separate?
Those are separate.
Okay.
Just update for council as well. Chris did mention dropping a key off to the gates. You will notice that they do have the gates locked now. He did drop a key off at the office, and I did reach out to Aaron after asking Mark to make sure it was okay. We will get copies and distribute those keys out to police and fire. So if we have any incidents there, you know, our first responders will have access to get into the campus area. So we'll get those keys and copies made and distributed as soon as we can.
Brian, that's already
Yes.
taken care of. I've already delivered to fire department, police. I met with Chief Fuller yesterday and dropped all that stuff off. So save the key making. We're already got it taken care of, bud.
You're the man, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Very
Keep
good.
messing around, you're going to be mayor someday.
No comment.
Yeah, that's a smart move.
All right. So we'll plan another session 30 days out from here. We'll get that on our calendars. And Aaron, if you need like an extra 30 minutes on your Zoom, we'll do it from the county.
Can I ask one more question?
Nope, that's it.
Confluent, we're not running out of time here, I don't think. Did he say that was a 4-month process?
Well, it can be as long as we want. Right now, we are trying to target being done in October. I think that's our time frame, right, Chris? October, November. So we would like them to have a final product to us in late October, early November. Now they could do that a little faster, but the logistics here and meeting with everybody, making sure they get a chance to talk with everybody, plus COVID, we gave them a little more time.
And does that include time for citizen and public input and information?
Yep.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that when they do present that product for us to review, it can go back for revision. So as we go through the process of developing this plan and we get all this input from the community, from stakeholders, we get to November and say, yeah, we're not quite comfortable. For whatever reason, we go back and say, give me version 2 or 1.2, whatever you want. So it's highly flexible in that regard. Good questions, though. Very good. Anybody else? Any questions on that?
I'm interested to know, and this I guess has some pertinence in terms of maybe day-to-day operations, as well as the kinds of approvals that you've mentioned with RFP, with the master plan as it's presented and things like that. What does it look like? What does the decision making look like? Is it a simple majority of both the Board of Supervisors and the City Council? And if both bodies are largely in agreement, then things move forward. Does one have veto power? Does it need to be an exact, do we need to match up and both organizations say yes? Does one trump the other? Do we know that?
I'm going to give you my political answer, Dylan, is no, we don't know that.
Okay.
Keep in mind right now, Marion County owns the property. So
Sure.
our technical answer is the Board of Supervisors is the decision-making body.
Sure.
However, that's the technical answer. So if we need to get to a point where we can't move forward on anything, Steve is right. We have to have a return to the taxpayer.
Absolutely.
Because we're putting up Marion County taxpayer money to support this. I don't envision that happening. What I would like this to be is a collaborative process between the Board of Supervisors and Knoxville City Council, where we come to some kind of common understanding on what we want for the property, what we want to see happen. And you folks need to be the drivers of that. You're the elected representatives of the city of Knoxville. So I'm actually going to put the responsibility on you to make sure that you're getting what you want out of this campus. Okay? We're going to come along from a financial side and those things and say, does it meet our objective of integrating into Knoxville, your overall planning, and provide some type of long-term financial return to our taxpayer? Bigger tax base, new businesses, those things. If it doesn't meet those criteria, we're going to have a debate. Okay?
Sure.
So, but the driver for how this looks and feels and those things, that's you. You guys have to have that in your mind.
Absolutely. And I think that was our initial conversation and understanding, and I think that's, I'm glad to hear that that's kind of the standard by which some of these decisions are going to be evaluated. So
Board,
that's
Steve,
helpful.
Keisha?
Well, I totally agree. My goal in this whole thing is to see Knoxville grow. If Knoxville does well, Marion County does well.
That's right.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the whole objective.
Yep. No, I think we're all on the same page with broadly what we hope the campus to be and the outcomes of this. It's just, those some of those smaller individual decisions along the way.
Right. And Dylan, if I don't like what you're saying, I'll just pull the plug on the Zoom meeting. So.
Been there, done that.
All right.
Been there, done that.
I think we all want the same thing.
We do. You're right.
Yeah. No, this is a collaborative process, folks, and I'm excited about it. I think this is what our community expects.
Yep.
And I see this being a positive experience for us. And like Matt said, not everybody's going to agree, and we're not looking for 100% agreement. But amongst us, anyway, the elected representatives, we have to respond to what we think, not just the need today, but the need will be 20 to 30 years from now. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
So think about it in that vein, and you guys, like I said, you're going to be instrumental
I have
in
no
defining that
expectations.
space.
I have no expectations, Dylan, of seeing any return on this investment in my lifetime. Seriously, but
Well,
but,
that's
but I hope
that's
our
a good
children,
point.
I hope our children, our grandchildren do.
That's right.
Steve, that's a good point. I guess that was one of the comments I wanted to make before we adjourned. Is for people, that expectation for people to just keep in mind that it is exciting. I'm glad that we are partnered together with the county, but we also have to realize that this is a long process, and we have to be patient. And sometimes that's hard. I know I fall into that same category, but I think we all need to remember that this will be a long project that we have to have a lot of patience with.
Yep. That's a great comment, Brian. Thank you. Any other questions before we
lose it again?
before we run out of time? All right. So we'll set something up 30 days from now to continue this discussion. And with that, Brian, I'll let you guys adjourn first, then we'll adjourn as a board.
Okay. Council, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Morris, seconded by Gata. Roll call, please.
Gata,
Yes.
Morse,
Yes.
Plum,
Yes.
DeYoung, yes, Sir.
Yes.
Very good.
And we are adjourned at 5:54. Mark?
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Board of Supervisors, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Jake?
Combs,
Aye.
Ramey,
Aye.
Johnner.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and your discussion. We look forward to this project.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a good night.